Welcome to American Players Theater Talkbacks to Go. I'm Buzz Kemper, and I invite you to take a walk up the hill with Orange Schroeder and me as Orange talks with actors Gavin Lawrence and David Allen Anderson about APT's 2019 production of August Wilson's Fences.
We're here today talking about August Wilson's Fences, a play by August Wilson, as you might gather. And I'm fortunate to have two guests with me, Gavin Lawrence, who's playing Gabriel Maxon, and a newcomer at APT, David Allen Anderson, who's playing his brother, Troy Maxon. It's the first time that APT is doing an August Wilson play, which is very exciting for all of us. And Brenda DeVita had mentioned that she wanted American Players Theater to be known as doing the American classics as well as the rest of the world canon. So why is it possible that August Wilson can become part of the season this year?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously an issue of APT finally embracing the fact that African Americans and writers of color can also create poetic, dense, classical language. And August Wilson, in my opinion, is the greatest American playwright. In the 80s and most of the 90s, his plays were produced more than any other playwright in the country. And he is a classical writer. He just writes from an African American classical perspective.
And this year we were able to do it because we have a company that can reflect the casting of Fences, which I assume is entirely African American?
Yeah, well, I think also the company was created and has been evolving so that APT can have more flexibility when wanting to cast plays like this. I mean, I have to say that when I first met Brenda and Carrie here at APT, my first question was, why haven't you done August Wilson? And that was 3 years ago. So I think they've made some progress, and I think they're coming to realize that we can find classical writing in writers other than dead white men, to be quite frank.
You mentioned that August Wilson was particularly produced in the 80s and 90s. This play, of course, is from 1985. It's the sixth play in his 10-part Pittsburgh cycle, each one set in a different decade in Pittsburgh. So what can you talk about Pittsburgh in the 1950s, which is when Fences takes place?
Well, first, this is, of the 10, there's only one that was set outside of Pittsburgh, and that was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's set in Chicago. But, you know, it's interesting because the idea of chronicling a slice of African-American life from each decade, I mean, it's our stories are so rich, our trials and tribulations are so many, that you have to try and find a way to tell a story that can encompass them. And he does it really well because he's very specific about it, which I think is the reason why audiences not of this particular culture can embrace it. In order to be so specific, you have to be very honest in telling it. And once you're honest in telling it, then others outside of it can look forward and see, oh, that's me, or that's my father, or that's my uncle, or my aunt, or whatever. And I think he captures that really, really well. And I think it's a story that your audience is really going to really embrace.
Yeah, I think specificity breeds honesty, which breeds universality. Mm-hmm. And in August's plays, you can smell the place. You can feel the people. He's so specific and at the same time poetic in a way that I feel instead of alienating people who may not be a part of that culture, mm-hmm. it pulls them in because we're speaking a larger language other than everyday vernacular.
And the culture of Pittsburgh was so rich at the time. I mean, you've got this guy who's a garbage man, but outside of who he is and what he does, it was such a rich culture of art, literature, progression in the city. And to have a situation where this guy, as you'll find out, who's bitter about his lost opportunity to play baseball, and it speaks to the effects of that loss, not just for him, but for the culture, because once the integration happened, it began to deteriorate African-American cultures and neighborhoods all around the country because the dollars they were spending towards Negro League baseball began to go towards Major League Baseball, and they weren't going directly into the community. So when you talk about the effects of on the community, or talk about his purpose in that, I think it's a microcosm for those sorts of things. And a lot of people don't know a lot about Pittsburgh, and he kind of slices out something that we can all go, wow, this is really, really interesting.
And there's some baseball history that might be useful background, too, that you just alluded to.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, Jackie Robinson integrated in 47. And as I stated, what people don't know, a lot of people don't know, they talk about the beauty and they celebrate, finally, America's pastime, the great white American game being integrated. But what it did was it took a lot of money. It took a lot of things out of the black community. Because, you could go to Crawford's Grill, which was a very well-respected jazz joint in Pittsburgh. You could go to Crawford Grill and see great Negro League baseball players. You could rub shoulders with them. They were there. You could see them walking down the street. But once integration happened, those guys either went to the major leagues, and most of them didn't, because they didn't have what was considered the proper, I don't know what the word would be. They didn't have the proper makeup to have to deal with what was going on. So Jackie Robinson was selected for that. And it wasn't to integrate baseball. It was really about money.
As sports often have been, I think.
It often is, yeah. Yes.
So the title Fences refers to the fences being built during the course of the play, but since it's plural, there are obviously some other fences being referred to. Do you want to talk about that, Gavin?
Well, I think we're going to talk about relationships. I think the primary fence that is being built and at the same time destroyed is the fence between Corey and his father, between Troy and Corey, who's Troy's son, and kind of that evolution of a young boy becoming a man, and what it means to rebel against your father's ways, as tends to happen in many families, I think. And I think that father-son dynamic is a universal one. And then going back to what David was saying, just relating fences to us as a people, I feel as though integration on a larger level, other than just baseball, was a catch-22 for our culture, because we lost a lot of things that were specific to us, a lot of things that unified us in a way that made our communities rich. We lost a lot of communities via integration, and I feel that in the act of integrating black and white culture, we created fences within ourselves and within our own communities, because some of us aspired to assimilate more into white American culture, where others of us decided to hold on to what was more specifically ours. And so there was this fissure, there was this division that continued to take place, and if I dare say continues to take place today, the fences that have been built within our communities, within our culture, within our families.
I think it's beautiful that you mentioned that, because fences being here is the breaking down of that sort of barrier, I believe, for APT, them bringing in this type of play. So the fences are still up, and we're still breaking them down.
And speaking of barriers, I wanted to mention that both of your characters have Maxon as their last name, which was a combination of Mason and Dixon, the Mason-Dixon line that separated the slave states from the free states. And, Pennsylvania, being a northern state, was not a slave state. And yet, wouldn't you say that the impact of the years of slavery has carried over into the culture that we're seeing in Fences?
I would say yes. Pittsburgh was a hub for transition, that field to factory movement, so to say, from the South to the North. Pittsburgh, Detroit, Chicago, there were hubs for it. And what happened was you cross the Mason-Dixon line and you come to the North and you find yourself in a different sort of institutionalized racism, a different sort of sharecropping, so to say, because the struggles that they had coming out of the fields, open spaces, even though they're doing work that's backbreaking sun up to sundown, and then you move into the factories And in the housing, where you no longer have the open spaces, now you're stacked up on top of each other. And the way that they were forced to labor in the early days of the factories, it was the same sort of system as sharecropping. You come in behind the 8 ball and they keep you behind the 8 ball. And if you deal with some of his other plays, for instance, Gem of the Ocean deals with that, how that sort of pressure on the new black culture created riots and situational problems. Troy talks about his journey coming up as a young man and living under a bridge, thinking he's coming to freedom and coming to a world where he's got to fight even harder because now we're in what we call the concrete jungle. So so there is, and all of that. This play takes place in 1957, 58. What's that, 58? We're 80, 90 years. We're less than 100 years removed from emancipation. So it's fresh. It's fresh, and you've got new generations coming in, and they're trying to rewrite it. They're trying to change things. So it's definitely fueled by the history and the power and the pain of slavery.
It's fresh now because the legacy of slavery is far-reaching. It's 2019, and I love American Players Theater, but this is one of the top classical theaters in the country. Why did it take 40 years to do an August Wilson play? That's just one example of the mentality that we have to try to overcome as a people and as a country when it comes to this abomination that we still have yet to really embrace as being the reason that we're the most powerful nation on earth.
And both of you have a special relationship with doing August Wilson plays. Tell me what it is about his writing that's so important to you.
It is a poetry. It is a song. It's my song. It's in Joe Turner's Come and Gone. Harold Loomis is told. They talk about losing your song. It's my song. It's the rhythm that I speak. It's the soundtrack of my youth. These people and the way that they speak, and it's littered with stories. It's one that if you just embrace it, if you follow it along, it just breathes so much, and it's just a great sound to the ear for me.
It's our music.
Yes.
It's our music. August wrote from a musical place, and doing these plays, saying these words, it's like playing jazz, which is the only real American musical art form that was created in this country by African Americans. So to speak the words, it's like playing jazz. There's a theme, and you improvise on the theme, and then you come back to the theme. Everybody is integrated in this large musical presentation.
And this one sort of represents a transition out of the old style, the blues, into the jazz, which is kind of a juxtaposition, if you will, the struggle with Troy, my character, moving forward and trying to think, have more forward thinking as he deals with his kids. So yeah.
We're so excited that August Wilson is finally making his debut at APT, and we hope it's the first of many to come. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
American Players Theater Talkbacks to Go is a co-production of Orange Tree Imports and Audio for the Arts. Please find us on iTunes and YouTube under APT Talkbacks to Go. Our theme song is called Play in the Woods and is written and performed by myself, Ben Ferris, Tyler Willenbrink, Noah Gilfillan, Elliot Gilfillan, Grant Blaschka, and Susan Hofer. With Orange Schroeder, I'm Buzz Kemper. Thank you for listening. A co-production of Orange Tree Imports and Audio for the Arts.